Roll call, second speaker, David Hill.
Speaker Lucian Tiger.
Present.
Representative Bill Beaver. Representative Pete Beaver. Present. Representative Joyce Deere. Representative Patrick Freeman.
Here.
Representative Johnny Green.
Present.
Representative Randall Hicks. Representative Robert Huff. Present. Representative James Jennings.
Here.
Representative Adam Jones. Representative Thomasine Hall Osborne.
Present.
Representative Joe Proctor.
Here.
Representative Mark Randolph.
Present.
Representative Rufus Scott.
Here.
Representative Travis Scott.
Here.
Speaker, we have 12 present, 4 absent.
12 present, 4 absent, constitutes a quorum. All business conducted to be official. Next item on the agenda is the speaker's report. November 27th, we had Alicia's birthday lunch in Muskogee, an Italian restaurant. It was really good. Pete and Johnny and Joyce showed up at that. December 4th, attended inauguration committee meeting in the executive conference room. December 11th, attended the Governor's Holiday Luncheon at River Spirit. On December 13th, we had Tracy's birthday lunch. It was in Tulsa. Yesterday, December 16th, we took Mr. Tom Brierton and Miss Lindsay Rowland of Franklin Creek Consulting to the Old Mobley Hospital, Eufaula Clinic, and calls the Muskogee Nation to let them gather information, see our facilities for the first time. Mr. Brierton, he's not here, but he's our lodges at DC, so he could kind of put pictures with what he's discussing and trying to get done for us at the Capitol. And then December 17th, I attended the Eufaula Dorm Christmas dinner. Just got back from that. And that's all for the speaker's report. Next item on the agenda will be second speaker's report.
December 11th, attended Heaton Ground meeting. Joe Proctor, Thomasine, Hall Osborne, present. Hopefully in the next couple of months, Lauren King will give her an update. Today, in the inauguration committee meeting, and right after that, went to 1 5. That's all I have for today's speech.
Thank you, Speaker Hill. Next on the agenda will be expedition report. President Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. College Board of Reading met on Monday, December 9th. Currently looking for an architect for their remodel and construction of their new classroom. The Oklahoma Department of Transportation gives it okay for the walking trail, so they started paving on that. And the board is scheduled for a training session for January, February. That's all I have.
You give us any news?
Yeah, the two of you will meet tomorrow night. I'll be attending, and I'll send out the financials for the minimum rate.
Any other special reports? Hearing none, next item on the agenda will be committee reports and announcements. Health, Education, and Welfare Chairperson Johnny Green.
Thank you, Speaker. Health, Education, Welfare met on December the 9th, following the review of the pass, NCA 19-146, 147, 148, and 149. I have no other items for consideration, and I don't know how to do it again.
Thank you, Representative Green. Land, Natural Resources, and Coastal Preservation Chairman Darrell Proctor.
Thanks, Speaker. LNC met on December 20th, the committee with the pass of PR 19-139, 140, 141, 142, 143, 144, and NCA 19-150 and 151. No other items to be considered. The next scheduled meeting date will be determined. I do so. Oh, joint. It's TR 19-153. And also TR 19-150.
Robert Hubbard.
Speaker, we mailed December 12th, and the following bills are due pass: NCR 19-006, CR 19-146, 147, 148, 149, and NCA 19-152. And the joint committee meeting, also in NCA 19-153, due pass. And we had a joint committee with Health, Education Welfare, and CR 19-151, CR 19-152. I'll just do that also. Oh, yeah, there was a referred education in the LNC, also NCA.
Thank you, Representative Hubbard. Next item on the agenda, the other business, the presentation from Franklin Consulting. That'll be from Tom Briarton, Lindsay Rowland. Good to see you all this evening.
Thank you very much, Speaker Tiger, and where would you like us to be at
Wherever
this
you're comfortable.
presentation?
You can stand there, after the camera's there, so you can stand at this end or where you are. This end actually probably be better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. As you know, my name is Tom Briarton. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here tonight and speak with you and give you an update on what we've been doing out in Washington, D.C. and what challenges lie ahead, both past projects and current projects. It's always nice to come out for a visit. I know it's been a little while since I've been out, and we actually had one major change to our firm. Very lucky to have added Miss Lindsay Rowland, who is actually handing out some materials for us tonight. Lindsay joined Franklin Creek Consulting back in July of this year. Lindsay comes to us from the United States Army, where she's a retired U.S. Army captain, spent a lot of time overseas in both Europe and in the Middle East, and worked on Capitol Hill as a Civil Vets Fellow, and then joined Franklin Creek Consulting in July, and she is now Director of Communications and Government Relations for us. So we're increasing our capacity to serve you by adding an outstanding young person to our ranks. So I would like to give you sort of an overview of the things that we have been doing and are going to be doing, and to review some of the sort of recent accomplishments and issues that we have dealt with over the last couple of years since I was last out to report. First and foremost, during the last Congress, we had major progress and success on the Stigler Act amendments of 2018. As you're all familiar with the Stigler Act, very unfair, blood quantum requirements on passing on land to the next generation and land falling out of restricted status. That law had not been changed since 1947. We were able to work in conjunction with a coalition of 5 tribes lobbyists, the Oklahoma delegation, key committee chairs to work to pass and enact into law major amendments to the Stigler Act that removed the blood quantum requirements. This was the first change to that law in 70 years. And it was a team effort. We're all very happy that it was able to be completed successfully. And a law that has resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of acres from restricted status is now off the books. And probate can be cleared in many cases now. We're very happy about how all that came out. We also worked on legislation for the Okmulgee Mountains National Park creation. We worked with a coalition of historic preservation and national parks groups in the community of Macon, Georgia, to establish the new Okmulgee Mountains National Park. Prior to this past Congress, that was a national monument area, national preservation area. It did not have national park status. By creating it as a national park, we were able to ensure the protection of irreplaceable Creek Nation historic and cultural sites, and we're able to enhance the ability of park visitors to learn the story of the Creek Nation and our heritage. And we are looking forward to hundreds of thousands of visitors that are going to come to that park over the years. And another important thing that it's going to do is, in the public's mind, and certainly in the mind of political and civic leaders in the state of Georgia and throughout the Southeast, remind people that these are the homelands of the Creek Nation, And there's a long history there going back thousands of years that needs to be known and respected, learned about, and it helps, like I said, reestablish the footprint in that area of the United States. Another project that we worked on was the restoration of the joint venture health clinic funds. The Eufaula Clinic, which Lindsay and I had the opportunity to tour yesterday, back during the appropriations process for fiscal year 2019, the Trump administration had neglected to put into the budget funding to staff up that joint venture facility. That facility plus 4 other facilities were in danger of not having any kind of federal funds to provide for the folks who were working there, and that burden would have fallen completely on the nation and the other tribes in that situation. We worked with a bipartisan coalition of Appropriations Committee members and chairmen to ensure that those funds were fully restored to the budget, and that the nation was not left to bear the full burden of operating the new clinic without the promised federal funding. And as an aside, when we went down and toured that place yesterday, it is wonderful. It's a fantastic facility, state-of-the-art, and it just was extremely, extremely impressive, and it was a great visit. Another issue that we worked on during the previous Congress was the Tribal Leaders Social Security Fairness Act. We worked to advance that legislation which puts tribes on equal footing, as they always should be, with state and local governments and municipalities, allowing them to opt into the Social Security program for Medicare taxes and benefits for elected and appointed tribal leaders. That legislation was signed into law by President Trump in September of 2018. A project that has been near and dear to my heart for many years, because the first project that I was called upon to work on behalf of the nation was the hickory ground situation in Alabama. And we've been working very diligently to protect the Carcieri claims in the hickory ground lawsuit against the Porch Band of Cree. For several years now, the Porch Band and others have been working to try to get either a partial or tribal-specific Carcieri fix that would have the federal government reaffirm the trust status of their lands in Alabama, including the lands of Wetumpka, where they've desecrated the hickory ground site and committed unspeakable crimes. We've always believed that it would be a travesty for the federal government to essentially endorse what they did there by taking those lands into trust and affirming their status. They were taken into trust in '84, but because of the Carcieri decision of the Supreme Court in 2009, the trust status of those lands is highly questionable and is a centerpiece of the litigation that the nation is doing on behalf of the hickory ground against the Porch Band of Cree. Should any type of Carcieri fix pass that reaffirms the trust status of those lands, that would cause a major problem for litigation we currently have in court. So we have successfully worked to educate members of Congress and to make sure that any legislation that would fix that problem for the porch does not pass and does not get signed into law to preserve our position in that lawsuit. We also work very diligently on the Murphy case in Washington, not from the lawyer side, but rather from the lobbyist side, to make sure there have been many voices in Oklahoma, particularly traditional anti-tribal interests, that have sought to try to find a legislative vehicle to put language in that would essentially moot out the Murphy court case and definitively extinguish the boundaries of the Muskogee Creek Nation that are an issue in front of the Supreme Court right now. There was a strong feeling that language was going to be included in the National Defense Authorization Act. National Defense Authorization Act is a piece of legislation. It's one of the few very, what we call must-pass bills in Congress, that you literally must pass it every year because this bill authorizes all the activities of the United States Armed Forces, and without it, they simply cannot operate. Senator Inhofe is the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, who is getting worked very hard by various interests in the state of Oklahoma that are opposed to tribes and tribal sovereignty to exclude or to include some type of Murphy language in the National Defense Authorization Bill. We worked very closely with his office, Senator Langford, and many other offices to ensure that that did not happen. And we're happy to report that as of last week, when they released the final language on the bill that will be voted on and sent to the President, there was no Murphy language included whatsoever. There was no anti-tribal language included whatsoever. Another project that we've done a lot of over the last couple of years is presentation of testimony to Congress. There have been several appearances by Chief Floyd, Ambassador Chaudhary, and others to testify in front of Congress. There we provide assistance with securing the chance for testimony, and we've helped draft and edit the testimony. Some examples are the broken promises hearing, which Ambassador Chaudhary was literally the star witness at. I don't want to embarrass John Deb, but he sort of put the new president of NCAI to shame with how good a job he actually did up there. And also the Stigler Act, Interior Appropriations funding, and several others. This is an ongoing project that we continually work on, is always looking for opportunities to get the voice of the Muskogee Creek Nation in front of congressional committees to tell our story, to give our position. And speaking of Ambassador Chaudhary, when he was named ambassador of the Muskogee Creek Nation, we arranged a large number of meetings directly with members of Congress to introduce him officially. And he was able to go in, talk about his appointment, talk about the history of the office, talk about the concerns of the nation. And I must tell you that there was an extremely positive reception in Washington to the appointment of Ambassador Chaudhary. Everyone liked the idea of the nation having an ambassador, and with John Deb being very well known in Washington as a former member of the Obama administration, former chairman of the National Indian Gaming Commission, and a Senate confirmed official. He has a lot of credibility out there. He's been a tremendous asset to work with. I worked for many years as a congressional staffer, and almost as many years now as a lobbyist. I will tell you this, many passionate lobbyists can come in and sit down with members of Congress and staff and do a very good job of presenting the position of their client tribe. However, there is no substitute for having an actual tribal official sit down in front of that member of Congress or that congressional staffer to tell the story. So the fact that John Deb has been out in Washington, D.C., that he has this credibility with the members out there, it's been amazing, because Chief Floyd and other leaders are very busy all the time, and their schedule doesn't necessarily always mesh with what the congressional schedule is and when meetings are available to be had. So the resource, I say this as working on our lobbying team, having that resource out in Washington, D.C. to be able to work with us has been a real positive. And I know that the council recently established this position, and like I said, it's been extremely well received. On a personal note, Lindsay and I are on the Republican side of the aisle, John is on the Democratic side of the aisle. We have a lot of complementary strengths. We're very strong on the House side, have good Senate ties. John Deb is very strong on the Senate side and has good House ties. It really has been a great marriage and a great match, and I don't mean to get too far off track on our report, but we're very, very happy that the council established this position, and it's been very successful and very well received. Other things that we've been doing, continual communications with key members of Congress. I mean, obviously that's our everyday job as lobbyists to convey the policies, views, messages of the Creek Nation to all the people that matter in Washington, D.C. Some recent examples, though, where we've been talking about things that are maybe even outside the policy field, was we had like the flooding earlier this year up in Tulsa that affected River Spirit. We were able to give updates to all the members of Congress, make sure that they were aware of what was going on, and if we got in a position where we needed to call upon them for assistance with FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, other agencies, that they knew what they were talking about and would be able to help out with that. Okay, great. All right. Some of the other things that we are working on, that we are currently working One of the most recent activities has been a lot of lobbying on the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization. Earlier this year, the House of Representatives passed a VAWA bill that was an extremely good bill that builds on the success of VAWA 2013. As you might know, prior to VAWA 2013, tribes did not have a lot of ability to go and prosecute individuals who were not of the tribe that had committed these violent acts. It would always go to the U.S. Attorney, and maybe the U.S. Attorney was interested in doing that, but perhaps the U.S. Attorney was more interested in trying to take down a drug kingpin or a terrorist, and it just sort of fell by the wayside, and there were a lot of cases that were not prosecuted. When VAWA 2013 came around, tribes were empowered, and with the Muskogee Creek Nation being an implementing tribe, we have a great story to tell and a strong voice on the issue. We've been working with a coalition of tribes and activists in Washington, D.C. to tell that story to the United States Senate. Because unfortunately, over the United States Senate, there's a different viewpoint that has some strong supporters on VAWA. And that viewpoint is one where they're looking to actually maybe not just expand tribal powers under VAWA, but to restrict or rescind existing powers under VAWA. That would be a huge mistake. That would lead to a lot of problems. But it's a major challenge because the majority of Republicans over there are in a position of somewhat skepticism on tribal courts, tribal law enforcement. It's very unfortunate. And so what we've been working to do is to make the case, and Ambassador Chowdhury, who was with us for a lot of these meetings, to make the case and talk about, okay, here's our story. And tribal law enforcement, tribal justice systems, tribal court systems are excellent venues that have the capacity to deal with these types of issues and should not be stripped of the ability to deal with them. VAWA is going to be an issue throughout 2020. It's going to be an ongoing fight. The Republicans recently introduced their bill. It has a lot of shortcomings. It has not gone to committee yet. There have not been any markups or hearings. Those battles lay ahead in 2020. At the end of the day, it's unlikely that a freestanding VAWA bill is going to pass. But what will happen is many elements of either the House or Senate VAWA bill will be included in what I referred to earlier, some must-pass piece of legislation like the National Defense Authorization Act, towards the end of next year. It's very much an inside Washington, D.C. game, but what we are doing is concentrating on the people who will be making the decisions on what goes into that must-pass bill to make sure that, first and foremost, there's nothing negative that goes in there that rolls back any of the gains on tribal authority in VAWA, and that also any other provisions that go in on VAWA with regards to tribes actually strengthen the hand of tribes to deal with those issues. We anticipate spending a great deal of time there to protect the nation's interests and tribal interests in 2013. Along with that is two other pieces of legislation that are going to get ultimately rolled into it: the Missing and Murdered Indian Women and Children Act and the Tribal Law Enforcement Officers Protection Act. One of the problems in dealing with violence against women, particularly on the tribal side, is there's a lack of coordination, a lack of information sharing, a lack of real hard data and statistics. People know that women and children are being victimized in great numbers, but there's no coordination between law enforcement agencies. There's no central gathering of statistics to actually fully define how big this problem actually is. And there are other problems in actually protecting tribal law enforcement officers who try to stop these and other crimes from happening. So this legislation that we're working on will address those issues. Another issue that is very important on the budgetary side is the Advanced Appropriations Act. I have been working in politics first as a staffer and then a lobbyist since 1990. And when I first started, government shutdowns and sequesters were a very, very rare occurrence, hardly ever happen. Over the course of my career as I've gotten older, I have seen that it becomes almost a yearly and sometimes multiple times a year occurrence where the government shuts down. And one of the the sectors that is hurt the worst is tribal governments and tribal healthcare. Because when the government is shut down, particularly like it recently was for 35 days last year, the tribes have to front all of that money to operate those services because there's no advance appropriations. However, if you're at the Veterans Administration, if you're Medicare, any number of other entities within the federal government, that doesn't happen. That money continues to flow no matter what, whether the government's shut down or not. So what we have been working on in conjunction with Congressman Tom Cole, for example, Congresswoman Betty McCollum, and others, is an Advanced Appropriations Act that each year when they enact the budget, it'll actually be a 2-year budget. So you have a 1-year safety cushion to where if there is a government shutdown, if there is a sequester, the tribe will not have to, at least even temporarily, come out of pocket to deliver these vital services to tribal citizens. That bill is making good progress, and we're optimistic that something will happen there. At this point, I would ask a couple issues that Lindsay has been working on with us that deal with veterans and the military, which is one of her areas of expertise.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here this evening. Thank you for having me. I've been really happy for the opportunity I had to come here and see firsthand many of the things that the nation is doing. Let me start out with the naming of the United States Navy ship, USN Muskogee Creek. The United States Navy launched a new class of ships. They are towing, rescue, and salvage ships. And this class will be known as the Navajo class. Each ship will be named after an Indian nation or a significant native warrior or hero who has served in the U.S. Navy. So we've been working on this issue quite heavily. It's been a team effort of the we have been working in a team effort to have one of the ships of this class named the USMS Muskogee Creek Nation. This would be a great honor for the nation. This effort has involved not just the work of Franklin Creek, but also Ambassador Chaudhary, and also Captain Calvin Foster, a Muskogee Creek citizen currently working at the Pentagon, and the first Creek citizen to graduate from the U.S. Naval Academy. Our team has been successful in enlisting the support of numerous key members of Congress and senators who have great influence over the Pentagon, such as Senator Inhofe, the chairman of the Armed Service Committee. This campaign has generated several letters and phone calls to the Secretary of the Navy urging him to name the ship the USNS Muskogee Nation. So we are currently waiting the next step. We don't know what's going to happen, but there will be an announcement by the Secretary of the Navy at some point in the near future. The next point I'd like to talk about, and this is a point that's very important to me as well as all of you, is Native veterans' health issues. And we've been very involved in lobbying it for and gathering co-sponsors from the Oklahoma delegation and elsewhere for 3 important bills that affect this nation. The first one is H.R. 4908, which is the Native Veterans Parity and Access to Care Today PACT Act, which would prohibit the collection of health care co-payments by the Secretary of Veterans Affairs from a veteran who is a member of the Indian tribe. Removing this co-payment will allow more Native veterans to access the system for treatments they need. Second, in the House, it's 4153, and the Senate, 2365, which is the healthcare access for urban Native Americans. This one is geared towards improving access to healthcare for Native veterans in urban areas by allowing urban Indian healthcare clinics to enter into arrangements for the sharing of medical services, facilities, and reimbursement from the VA, on par with IHS and 638 contract health facilities currently receive. Because many Native veterans do not live on tribal lands, this would allow those in urban areas to receive their health care from urban healthcare centers where they can get the health care they earn in an environment that is comfortable and convenient for them. And then finally, we're also working on, from the House 2791 and the Senate 524, the VA Tribal Advisory Committee. These House and Senate bills will establish a VA Advisory Committee on Tribal and Indian Affairs. And this committee will facilitate communication and understanding between the VA and tribal governments to better address the unique barriers Native American veterans face when accessing VA services. These advisory committee, when done for other issues in the VA, like the women's health care, which I've seen really improve, has been very effective in the past, and the VA tends to take these suggestions very seriously. They have a good track record for implementing these improvements. All of these bills have been subjects of recent hearings and markups and are making progress towards passage. We will continue to work on them in similar bills throughout the next year.
Thank you, Lindsay. And then one other current ongoing issue is historic and cultural preservation of important Creek Nation sites in the southeast United States. This encompasses both the original issue that brought me into the service of the Creek Nation, which was the Hickory Ground issue in Alabama, but it has grown far beyond that, with the many sites in Alabama, Georgia, and elsewhere that are in need of protection. So what we're working on is working with members of Congress, administration officials, historic preservation groups, and others to make sure that all of these sites in Creek homelands in the southeast are preserved and protected. These efforts include educating the members and administration officials on their importance, working to expand protections, supporting various historic preservation bills. Work in this area, as mentioned earlier, also includes our ongoing efforts on behalf of Hickory Ground and preserving all interests there, including in the Carcieri case. Other activities we are involved with that are not legislative but are also extremely important because they support the legislative activity. Political and outreach activities. I mean, first and foremost, our charge, we believe, is to maintain a strong Washington, D.C. presence for the nation. We've worked very diligently to ensure that the nation is included in the debate on all policy issues in Washington, and that our voice is clearly heard. This includes many activities, including hundreds of meetings with lawmakers and staff, helping to secure appearances by the nation's representatives as witnesses at hearings, participation in pertinent conferences and events with key decision makers and influential parties, and also coordinating activities with the federal lobbyists of the other 5 tribes and other Indian nations when appropriate to do so. That gives us a stronger voice and leverage. There is a old saying in Washington that also applies elsewhere: if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. And what we try to make sure that we do every single day is to make sure the nation has a seat at the table in Washington, D.C. by being out there, flying the flag, going to the meetings, working with members of Congress, working with staff, and working all the other pertinent parties to this, to make sure that when any policy question comes up, people know where we're at, what we want, and that we're going to be a factor in it. We've worked very diligently on Oklahoma delegation relationships. We've successfully built very, very strong, close, and lasting relationships with each and every member of the Oklahoma delegation in D.C. and their key staff members. We are constantly working to maintain and strengthen those relationships all the time. Hardly a week goes by that we're not interacting with at least one or more of our delegation members in the House and the Senate and or their staff. We also do that for other key Capitol Hill and administration relationships. We're working to cultivate those relationships, including individuals such as the chairs, ranking members, and committee members on important committees like House Natural Resources, which controls all tribal-related legislation in the House, the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, which does the same in the Senate, the House and Senate Appropriations Committees that control the spending for the BIA, the BIE, Indian Health Service, so on and so forth. We also spend a lot of time working with important officials at the Department of the Interior and the Bureau of Indian Affairs, all with an eye towards developing as many close allies for the nation in every way we can. Now, I am now 53 years old, and one of the few advantages of growing older is in Washington, D.C., many of the people that you came up with as a young staffer in your 20s are now in senior administration positions or the members of Congress, the chiefs of staff. They're in a position to really help. So one of the things I've really tried to take advantage of this growing older is to work with all these old friends that I used to be in the trenches with for many, many years, who are now in these positions to really help us. And the personal relationships that have been built up over the last 25 or 30 years really pay off in that situation. And that's something that, I'm very happy to be able to do on behalf of my clients, most especially the nation. One of the other arenas that we're very active in is fundraising and political events. It's an unfortunate fact in Washington, D.C. that all the politicians there are looking for political contributions. They're looking for fundraisers. So over the course of the year, we attend many political events for key members of Congress. It's a very important activity because many competing tribes and other interests are heavily involved in this. There are any number of tribes that spend well over $1 million a year in political contributions alone. They'll spend $1 million a year on lobbyists in DC. They'll go to every single event. I personally think that that is a foolish level of involvement, and that by being smart and working with the right people and taking advantage of the relationships that you have, you can do it for far, far, far less, and in a way that actually is more effective. So that's what we have concentrated on for several years, participating in the right fundraisers at the right time, with the right people who are actually in position to do something to help us. We also, I recently left office space where I was at and have set up a brand new office that's a townhouse that's 2 blocks off of Capitol. It's on Capitol Hill, 2 blocks from the actual U.S. Capitol. And one of the things we've been trying to do to leverage our influence with members of Congress is to open up our townhouse for fundraisers and events for members of Congress to come over and have those types of activities there. And that actually has paid off quite well for us. Our inaugural event was a bourbon and cigars event with Congressman Tom Cole, who is the co-chair of the Native American Caucus, in our backyard that started at 6:30, was supposed to end at 9. I think it ended at about midnight. Very successful, and it's those kind of after-hours relationship-building things that really help when a week later you're walking in and saying, Congressman or Congresswoman, we really need your help on this. We really need your help on that. Because you've built that friendship, you've built those relationships, they know you, they trust you, and they're willing to help. We also have made our offices available to those in the Oklahoma delegation that want to come over and use them as a place to sort of retreat away from Capitol Hill and maybe get away from the Democratic Club or the Republican Club and just sort of hang out and relax, maybe have a sandwich, make some phone calls, hang out after hours. And we've had, I won't get into names, we've had many members of Congress go over and do that over the last several months. And once again, that helps us build those relationships to where when we get to the point where we need to ask for something very important on the part of the nation, we can go to people who were walking in as friends, as opposed to strangers or somebody who just wants something. And then finally, one of the things that we've worked on has been continuing engagement and outreach with national tribal organizations. We regularly participate in a number of Washington, D.C. based tribal conferences, meetings, other events where we're able to gather intelligence on what's going on nationally, within any country, within these organizations in D.C. And our participation there helps illustrate a strong presence for the nation in Washington. Once again, John has been a great help on that because he's been coming to those as well. And involvement in these activities helps generate goodwill and also future issue allies with other tribes. It's always easier when we're trying to accomplish something for the nation to be able to actually go to lobbyists and representatives and leaders of other tribes that we work with and perhaps help them out on something to say, hey, we need your help and support on this, and they're willing to do that. But there's a lot of work that goes into that, basically every week to continue to work those relationships. A great example of that would be this VAWA coalition that we're participating in now, as well as participation with NCAI, NIDA, and many other groups. And with that, I will open up for any questions. That's the end of our prepared presentation. If you have any questions, comments, we'd be happy to take them.
Questions, Mr. Braxton? Mr. W.
Tom, Lindsay, Joan, thank y'all for coming down. It's good seeing y'all. I know we kind of skipped over it, and for various reasons, but one thing I just don't understand is about the whole issue between the tribes and the governor right now. It's we all know what the difference is and what our disagreements are with the tribes and the governor. But one thing I just don't understand is come January 1st, when he says Class 3 is going to be illegal. So what is in your opinions, how does he want to stop us from doing Class 3? Because obviously the state can't come in onto our casinos, onto our property and tell us to stop. So it has to involve a federal level at some point, to me, it just seems like it would. So just on your opinion, what's his thinking of, how is he gonna stop us? All 30-something tribes, the 100-something casinos that do Class 3 gaming. What's his angle on how to stop us?
Mr. Brown? Kevin?
I think, I don't want to get too much into anything since, I mean, that's legal, and that'd probably be more of something for executive session, but, you know, the tribes, as you've seen in the past, are united on the issue and are working on that issue and will remain united. And I think if you saw anything that was dated today in the YGA response to the governor's statements today, you know, things are going to continue to move forward as normal. So the tribes, as a group, will address that issue and make sure the interests of the nation are protected. I guess that's the simplest thing I can say right now, and I'm looking forward.
Well, I'm just sitting here thinking we have yet to hear anything. I mean, no offense, but people are asking me, and I haven't heard anything, you know, so I was just wondering what's our stance on it besides, you know, it's still gonna be legal. So I'm kind of sitting here December 17th, and I don't know anything, so. I mean, if you want to go into executive session, I mean, that's fine, but I think we should have some type of conversation about what's going to happen next. And I'm not hearing anything from the executive office, from you, Kevin, or from anybody, so. I don't know if somebody, I don't know, I might be the only one, I don't know, but.
Make a motion to executive session.
Secretary has made a motion to executive session, second by Representative Bill, excuse me, by Representative Hill. All. Next on the agenda, be announcements, have any announcements to council?
Joy, you need to run.
You'll be tomorrow night? Okay, also, if everyone has their bios in front of them, please have those turned in.
Oh, sorry.
Everyone has their bios in front of them, please have them turned in by the 19th of this month. Also, we'll have pictures tomorrow on the 18th from 4 to 6. We're gonna have to try to take a group picture first, so if everyone can be here around 4:15-ish, if that works for everyone, please. So, Mr. Jennings, we'll get the group picture taken first. Representative Huff?
Highway Department first meeting, we have this meeting here.
Any other announcements? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Representative Huff made a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Representative Hill. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. I'd like to ask Representative Jennings, please give the invitation.
Gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you in prayer this evening, asking for your guidance and direction. Father, we ask that you be with us as we go home tonight. Give us traveling grace. Be with those that are ill. Be with those that have lost loved ones. Father, we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.